Hello, you're listening to A Conversation With, a podcast where each week I'm joined by a different guest and we have a conversation on a topic of their choice. So let's meet this week's guest. My name, of course, is Jason, and joining us this week, coming all the way from Michigan in the United States, he is the host of Play D&D. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah, my name is Dante, and I created/host podcast Play D&D, where we take characters from movies, TV shows, comics, and kind of send them on new adventures, kind of like role-playing.
Yeah,
currently only on YouTube, but yeah.
Yeah, we will put a link in the description. I think at the moment you're doing a Guardians of the Galaxy run.
Yeah, I started a Guardians of the Galaxy campaign, starting with the first few episodes, just kind of introducing each character. And I think a week or two from now, I'll be releasing the first get-together episode with everybody escaping prison, so classic Guardians.
Yeah, excellent. So Dante, can you tell us the topic that we're going to be speaking about this week?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about filmmaking, and kind of not really the history, but more my knowledge, but also my experience having worked in a few student film projects. So hopefully I have some interesting insight.
Yeah, I know cinema is obviously a global thing, and even in England we've got classic English movies or British films, and all around the world they have their thing. But Hollywood, American blockbusters, that seems to be the kind of the go-to association with film. So it'll be interesting to see your insights. So where do we begin? I don't know.
Well, I guess I can talk about kind of the process. So there's really, in filmmaking, there's really three stages. So there's pre-production, production, and then post-production. And having worked on a lot of these projects, pre-production is definitely the most fun, because that's when you get all the ideas out there and you're like, oh, what if we do this with this character, and that's kind of like you're just pouring all the love that you have into this project, and then get production and post-production are like the nitty-gritty actually making it.
That's so interesting, because I think from like a general observer's point of view, we probably feel very much the opposite in that you'll hear about a film, they're like, oh, this film's coming out, and then they'll tell you about it and you're jumping ahead like 6 months later, you're like, what's going on with that film? Oh, they're still in pre-production. You're like, what?
Yeah.
There's nothing.
And it's not that like production or post-production isn't fun. Post-production probably isn't is the least fun, because that's like just piecing it together. That's editing, and it's kind of really the nitty-gritty of everything. But just like the world building and almost a lot of some of the projects that I've worked on, it's kind of the stuff that you get to make as kind of headcanon that doesn't even get put in the project. That is really where I find, at least myself, kind of the love of it is, for your film, say you're doing a film about, say, a photographer, you in your head might not include all of the photographer's backstory, or in the film you might not include all the backstory, but in your head you have his entire story, and then you get to kind of pick and choose what part of that you put into the film.
Do you feel that comes through a lot then? So, or maybe let's put it this way. So when you're watching a film, do you often think, I reckon there's more to this character than we know, or I have a feeling that, the writer or the director or whoever was kind of pushing this character, they had something in mind when they created this character? Do you feel that it bleeds through into your watching the finished product, that you can kind of see the strings behind the scenes?
Absolutely. I think really, personally, I think that all great films have that kind of, and I think when you have a rich character that's been built, all of this attention to detail has been put in by the filmmakers to the point where they know this character inside and out. I think at that point you can kind of feel it coming off the screen of, oh, this is a deep, interesting character. Whereas when a character's just kind of thrown together and you only really deal with the parts that you need, it can kind of come off a little flat almost. At least that's the way I feel.
Yeah. So how does that affect then? Because I think, thinking of the YouTube channel and the podcast you're doing, where you're kind of I'm guessing you're a big comic book fan.
Yeah, definitely.
So like there, you've got a property where you've got these characters that are already very established, but I suppose the difference is, you're saying that kind of, so maybe just take a step back. When you're talking of like fleshing out this character, their backstory, who's doing that? Is that the writer? Is that the director? Is it the producer? I mean, who do you feel is the one that's kind of got that character fully formed in their head, whether or not we see the final product?
Yeah, I feel part of it is making a distinction of whether or not the film is based on something else. So if the film's based on a book, or if it's, an MCU movie where they've got, the comics to build off of, or if it's, a reboot of another movie, at that point, I feel like it's either them fleshing out the character more, but like they already have a fully fleshed character that they can just kind of take in, whatever new direction they decide. But when it's an original film, I feel like it's if you have a passionate director who's kind of pursuing the project, I feel like it's really just whoever is the most passionate about the project. So if it's usually either the writer or the director, but or sometimes both.
Yeah.
But they're the ones that are, pushing the story forward and really pouring their heart and soul into this project. And so I feel like they're the most invested in these characters and everything. So in their head, they're the ones fleshing them out.
Right. Because, I mean, that's what I was thinking, talking about these like existing characters, is that, you take a new project, a new character we've just created for this film, and in my mind, I've got all his backstory, how he was brought up, why he feels this way, why he'll act this way in this situation. Whereas when you go to, like the MCU movies, you've got characters who maybe the writer or the director or whoever's pushing this film through, they've kind of got an idea of why this character's doing this or doing that. But the audience, especially if they are, hardcore fans that have read every book this person's ever appeared in, they maybe have that backstory in their minds, which is why they can be like, well, I don't think he would act like that in that situation, or is he a bit out of character? So it's almost the reverse of normal, of a kind of an independent film where, maybe he's not revealing all the details, but you're seeing the action because he's got very clearly in mind the backstory. And here, you're seeing the actions, and often you've maybe got more of let's say, it's not really the backstory, because we know there is a distinction between the comic book character and the movie character, but in many people's minds, they're like, well, hold on, he wouldn't have done that. Why? So I suppose, do you feel that affects it somehow?
Well, I think, honestly, I think that's a downfall of the comic book movie industry, is that they have, it's a weird thing to say that this is a downfall, but like, it's almost a pitfall that they could fall into, is that they already have such fleshed out characters, because at that point, if they do something wrong, then the audience can feel that. And then at that point, the magic is gone, and the illusion of film is gone, and all of a sudden the person's like, what? That doesn't seem right. And so I feel like it's an interesting industry where everybody wants more of these characters that they absolutely love, but the filmmakers have to kind of tread carefully and make sure they know their stuff so that they're not upset. Yeah,
and I suppose often the complaints in films are, well, this character didn't really grow, or I didn't see a change in the character. He was, the same in scene one as he was at the very end. Whereas it seems almost again the opposite with sort of comic books. They don't want them to change too much. It's like, oh, he's too different.
It's a really weird balance.
Is there a genre of film that you find particularly appealing? Is there? I mean, I'm pretty sure I've said it on the podcast before that for me, like, I just want it to be pure escapism. That's why I love the Marvel movies. I love all those kind of things, because I'm like, well, I know that's so unrealistic. I'm not going to look out my window and see Iron Man fly by. And anytime someone tells me like, oh, you've got to watch this film, it's so real, it's so, I'm like, that. If I want real, I'll look out the window. I don't want to go and see a film that's real. But I don't know, for you, is that the kind of thing that does draw you? Do you like these films that are more grounded, more realistic, more human, I suppose is the word I should use?
Yeah, I don't know. I think so, but like not entirely, because I think my favorite genre of film is sci-fi. So that's, fantastical and weird, but my favorite film within that genre, it would be Blade Runner 2049, which is, realistic and down to earth. So I think it's kind of a combination for me where film, like storytelling, and kind of just receiving this story and kind of experiencing it. I think for me, it's character driven. So when a character feels real, like even real within a crazy universe. So like even MCU characters, say like Captain America, who feels like real within that world. That's kind of what I think draws me.
All right, yeah, I get that. I think that's it's understandable. It's nice to know you like sci-fi. That's it's definitely my go-to genre as well, probably. Again, because it can be real within, I suppose, the rules that they have established for whichever universe they're in, or ships work in this way, planets work in that way. Okay, that's fine. You've got a list of rules, you're sticking to them, brilliant. But it's not just sort of tragic something that's happening somewhere that could be next door to me, and I just don't want to think about that when I'm supposed to be.
But I enjoy those films too, but I don't think I really I think I'm just a fan of film just in general, but they won't make my top however many films just because I enjoy almost figuring out the world and the weirdness of it. But I also, I have a place in my heart for films that are Prisoners or something, where it's, this really dark film about, somebody being kidnapped or something like that. I enjoy that as well, but I think the whimsy and fantasticalness of sci-fi just edges it just a little bit above everything else for me.
Yeah, I suppose I kind of jump to its defense in a little bit because, you think like Oscars and things like that these movies that, as you say, they might have an established reality, and they might be, very good portrayals and good actors and fleshed out characters, but because it's in space, it's kind of, it's just, a popcorn flick. And it's not really a serious movie. And the movies that are considered serious generally are just because they're depressing or because they talk about a subject that's not very nice.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Oscars, because I pay attention to them, and I like watching, films that are nominated because I figure they're probably really good. But in general, recently, I think the Oscars are kind of whacked almost now. It's weird because there's a lot of it's almost like they're prejudiced against comic book movies or sci-fi movies, and they're more it's like they're prejudiced towards those films, and they want more of the Moonlights or whatever. Moonlight won a year or two ago or something like that, which is just the dramas that show real life and everything. So I think personally I don't really hold the Oscars too high. I keep watching each year and seeing if they'll come back around for me, but I think in general they're almost kind of prejudiced.
It's kind of
maybe that's just me.
It's kind of like your reality TV. So I know I shouldn't be watching this, but for some reason it draws me in. I don't think I could tell you what won an Oscar in the last, 20 years probably. The only thing I know about the Oscars of recent years was the whole La La Land and the being called up and not actually winning.
Yeah, that was bad.
So that's kind of all I know about it, and maybe a little bit of the history.
I don't really even watch them anymore. I just kind of keep track of what's won what, and see if I agree almost. But I mean, it's all personal preference, and maybe I'm just being biased in my own way, but
So you've worked on some film, some movie. You kind of done some some work behind the scenes. You were saying before. What were you doing?
Well, it's funny. This will kind of lead into my mindset on Play D&D also. But my main job was mostly cinematography. So my brain is really visual, and it's not. It's weird because I'm not. I mean, I am a visual learner, but like I can learn other ways pretty easy as well. But my brain just works visually, like cinematically. And I don't know if that's just because I watched a ton of films when I was a kid. But like if I think through a memory or something, it'll be like I'm watching a movie, and it won't be super detailed because my memory is horrible. But like it'll be a third person shot or whatever of somebody. So my brain really works well to telling stories visually. And so on this one project, I was in college, not in college, and I was helping my one friend who was in college on a film project that he had. And I hadn't really worked like with a camera before. As a kid, I would take like my parents' camera and take it outside with my friends and like record some video, but I never actually gotten like into editing or anything, so I don't think those exist anymore. But like I had never really done anything like that because I didn't think I could. And then I picked up the camera and I started doing some of these shots, and he's like, and my friend was like, those are really interesting, like interesting shots. And I was really so I was able to kind of go into the cinematography field of it / kind of co-director, because I guess like I'm really about visual storytelling. So telling a story through a visual medium without having to give dialogue explaining it. And so I think that's why a lot of my favorite films are these beautiful films with amazing cinematography, because that's just kind of how my brain works. But yeah, and then the most recent project I worked on was a Joker short film.
All right, cool. Okay, let's hear about that.
Yeah, and originally we were gonna have a big story and everything, but as we were coming down to the line, we wanted to get into the school's film fest, and we didn't have time, so we ended up kind of doing like a John Wick type thing where it's more just kind of a fight scene, and just kind of seeing what level of choreo we could kind of get. And in that, I was also the cinematographer, but that was a lot of fun because we got to design the choreo, the entire choreo fight scene, and we would have our actors play it all out like in one long scene, and we'd film it from various angles, and then that way in post we could just take snippets and cut it as we wanted, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So does that spill over then again into the way you watch the way you watch a film? So like for most people, they just kind of sit there and they turn it on and just get immersed in what's going on, and you're probably thinking, so they've just flipped around to the back of this character, so they must have had a second camera sat there to catch that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because I think like with anything, if you've got a job, for example, if it's your job, and then you're out in the road, you're driving around, you see somebody doing your job, you're like, how are they doing that? Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I wouldn't have done it that way. So does it spill over then into your enjoyment of movies? Do you find yourself dissecting sort of what must have been going on at the time as you're watching these scenes?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes not to the betterment. Like sometimes it actually sours an experience.
That was really going to be my next question.
Yeah. So one of my a film that I love is Mad Max Fury Road, and it looks amazing. They have got amazing colors in that, and amazing like action sequences. But watching it a second time, I was less focused on the story and more focused on like kind of just seeing how they kind of filmed it, and just watching as somebody who has done that and seeing, what they did and being like, oh, that's cool, or oh, I don't like that. And one thing that he does in that film is a lot of the action, the car chases, the director plays them at like 1/2 speed, almost like 1.5 speed.
Right.
So they're like just that little bit over normal speed. That it's like almost jarring, but like for first time watching it, you don't really notice, and you just feel like this fast paced, fast paced. There it is, fast paced, like high octane, fight scene. But watching it a second time, I was like, oh, I don't really like that much. Yeah. So yeah, it definitely kind of bleeds in, and you can also it can also like affect something that I'm watching like for the betterment though, because possibly my favorite TV show is Legion on Fox.
Right.
And they do the whole premise of that show is that he has like mutant powers, but he also has schizophrenia.
Yeah.
And so they do a lot of
weird,
really cool stuff with like with the cameras. So they'll do like a fisheye lens here, so it distorts it this way, and then they'll do different colors in this one, and so it's really that I absolutely love, because it's just crazy visuals and kind of playing with the camera and what you can do with it and stuff. So it can go both ways.
Yeah, so okay, two-edged sword. It's nice to know, but yeah, because I feel like that bleeds over into my life at times. Like occasionally I have to do like a presentation or a talk on something, and then or maybe someone else was supposed to do it, and then they say to me, "Oh, they're not going to be there. Can you prepare it?" And I prepare it, and then I get told, "Oh no, actually they will be there." And then the whole time I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, "Yeah, I wouldn't have done it that way. I would have done it slightly differently," and it just ruins it for you. So I can imagine every time you go to the cinema being like, "Oh, really? You're gonna shoot it that way? That's not how I would have done it." But
and I think it's funny because I've actually had moments where I've watched a film and I've like because sometimes it's just I watch it and I'm like, I don't like that, but then other times it's like I watch it and it's like, oh, I don't like that. Here's what I would have done instead. And one time that happened was I was actually watching Suicide Squad, which is a film that I was really excited for and really disappointed by just walking out of the theater. And so even just walking out, I was like, well, this is what I would have done with the ending instead of what they actually did.
This is what I would have done with that whole movie. That just
well, yeah. But like, it was weird because that film specifically, I was like, there's like a tiny piece, a little nugget of a really good movie in here, and surrounded by all this garbage. And my brain immediately went like, all right, let's take that little nugget of a good idea and let's see what could have been if I was the director, which never would have happened. But it's kind of wishful thinking. But like, it's kind of fun.
So is this a hint for a potential upcoming campaign that we might see on your YouTube channel or your podcast?
Maybe. I'm actually developing a Harley Quinn series right now. Yeah. So that by the time this comes out, that it might actually be out for Patreon people. So yeah, maybe potentially.
Yeah, no, because I suppose that's a nice outlet that you've got, isn't it? That you kind of you can go back and go, yes. I would have done it differently, and this is what I would have done, and call up a few friends and say, right, guys, we're going to record this.
Yeah, we're going to play this out.
This is how we do it better.
Yeah, and so to go back to D&D, because my brain works visually, I really enjoy telling these stories and attempting to paint a picture. I trip over my words a lot, and I don't think I'm very good at describing them sometimes, but in my head I've got this vision almost of like, oh, Drax is like flying through space and hurtling towards this massive ship or whatever, and then when it comes out, it's like Drax is flying through space. But like no,
I get what you mean, because I feel like I'm exactly the same, but with art, if that makes sense. So I see things as well incredibly like vividly visual. Like you tell me something, and I can picture it all. I'm quite good at then, expressing that in words. But if I try to draw it, like try to put it on, it's a disaster.
Yeah, I'm a terrible artist. I
can't draw anything. But and it's frustrating because I've got in my mind this amazing picture, and there is no way to get it out of my mind. And I suppose that's a similar limitation, because I imagine in an ideal world you'd be making this as a movie. You'd have that budget, and you could put in what you wanted. Instead, we're going lower budget. We're going radio, let's say, trying to describe what's so clear in your mind.
yeah, and definitely, and I think that's part of the fun of it too. Is like, it's obviously a lot less time to make than a movie, so you can kind of have almost like this taste of making a movie over the course of however many weeks it takes you to come up with the idea and record it. I hadn't actually thought about it that way, but it's almost like mini movie making, which is really cool. But also one thing I wanted to mention was the reason that I decided to make Play D&D based on existing characters is my brain also works in kind of a way that, like, I'm not paper and say, all right, make a movie. My brain just like stops. But if you give me a blank sheet of paper that says Batman at the top and says, all right, make a movie, I can do that like in a heartbeat. So it's really weird where it's like I can't. It's hard. It's not impossible, but it's difficult for me to come up with a completely original idea. But if I have some part of an existing idea, I'm really good at taking that and just expanding it, which is why I worked really well with my friend who I worked on the 2 projects with. His name's Zach. He plays Drax in D&D, actually. That's why I worked so well with him, because he is really good at coming up with those ideas. And he's a really good director as well. So he would like kind of come up with the idea, and then he has a really awesome pitch, and I'm like, sweet, what if we did this with it? And it's kind of like this fun brainstorming session, which I think is part of the reason why I love the brainstorming pre-production part of it. But so that's kind of like my mindset, and why I ended up doing Play D&D that way, is just because my brain works that way for some reason.
Do you think maybe that's why we see so many I was going to say couples, it's not really what I mean, like teams of you've got these kind of writing teams, directing teams now. It seems like back in the day you had your kind of your Alfred Hitchcock, and he was the main man, even though it seems that his wife was supporting him a lot behind the scenes. But like now you've got like your Lord and Miller, and I think who just did the Infinity War,
Russo brothers.
The Russo brothers. So you've got these teams of people. But I suppose if one is like you, and just give me the hint of an idea and I'll run with it, but you need that catalyst to kind of give you. Do you reckon that's probably why we're suddenly seeing so many of these? Because it seems to be a real common, at least in my mind, a common thing these days.
Yeah, and I think that's good, actually. I think the Hitchcocks of the world are few and far between, in that, like, you're not, like, personally, I think 9 times out of 10, if you put one man in a room and tell him to write a movie, that script's going to not be very good. It'll probably have some pretty good ideas in it. But when you have somebody else to bounce ideas off of, it's really awesome, kind of like barrier almost. Like before you even get to, test screenings and everything and seeing what the public enjoys, you see what this other human being thinks. So it's you can throw these ideas out that are like, well, is this good? And sometimes it's like, yeah, that's great. And sometimes it's like, no, that's garbage. Get that out of here. But like, I think that's really, really important. And I think that's why we're seeing more teams, is just, you have somebody to bounce off of. So you're not like, so it's not just you isolated coming up with this idea that has some good bits, but also some really terrible bits, So I think that's to the benefit of the industry, really.
Yeah, I suppose as well why, I would say one of the common complaints I'm hearing recently, who am I? One of the common complaints I hear on podcasts and things like that is, there's no original content anymore. When was the last time everything is from a book, from a it's a reboot of a previous series, or it's a television series that's now been turned into a film, or it was a comic book that's but I suppose it works on a similar vein, doesn't it? It's just you saying, well, look, I've got ideas, I just need that push. Oh, look, here's a book with a character that I find interesting, and the story that I might put on film is nothing like the book, but it was just the character that I liked, and I ran with it. So I suppose we shouldn't complain too much.
Yeah. And I think like even for me, I could go off of as little as just a pitch. So like even if you just get one guy that has an idea. I really like, there's an interview with Dan Stevens, who plays the main character in Legion. He's also Beast in the live action Beauty and the Beast. And there's this really cool interview with him, similar to what you do, where it's just kind of a conversation. And he said that filmmaking is just one madman taking a mad idea and going to another guy and saying, hey, look at this cool idea I've got. And it's just working of a bunch of madmen working together to make a mad idea into a thing. And I think that's a really cool description, because really film is just one person taking an idea they had to another person and saying, what about this? And then the next person saying, all right, cool. What if we did this, and this with it, And it's really a really cool kind of collaborative process and industry.
So is it something you hope to do more of in the future? Is there possibly a way in for you, or it's just a hobby that you're enjoying doing in your free time?
Right now it's a hobby. I mean, it's funny because when I was a kid, I always wanted to be an inventor, because I didn't even think that being a person that made movies was a thing that I could do. And so when I got into college, my friend was into film, and I was like, oh, I guess I could kind of try this out and see how I am. So right now it's kind of a hobby, but I think it's definitely something I'm going to keep doing as a hobby and kind of improving, like kind of honing. But if I get a break, if I suddenly, for some reason, somebody's like, hey, you want to direct this movie? I'm not going to
You're not going to say no? Really?
I don't think. But if it never happens, I'm not going to be surprised. But I think I have to find enjoyment in the little stuff I do, And I think Play D&D is really kind of a creative outlet for me too, because we moved, my wife and I, at the end of last year, we moved up to Michigan, and I had like this creative itch that I had to scratch, which was just like, because before that I'd been working on the projects with my friend and everything, and now I didn't really have that, so I was like, I gotta do something. And so I think Play D&D right now kind of functions as that outlet, and really just kind of me pushing myself to see what I can do. Yeah.
So I have a question now about technology, because I imagine on the one hand, for you, that must be brilliant, because 20 years ago, to make like a fan film or just to do something yourself would have been incredibly difficult, because you just didn't have the resources to do these kind of things. Now, it seems like somebody can just almost record a movie on their phone. I know that's kind of an exaggeration, but it's so accessible.
No, it's actually, sorry if I could just don't mean to interrupt your question, but an interesting thing. There's recently a movie that came out called Upgrade, which is a really interesting film. I haven't seen it. Like, it's an interesting concept. I haven't seen it, but I do want to. But I listened to Mr. Sunday's interview with the director, and he actually said that there's this one scene where they do something really interesting with the camera moving pretty quickly, and they actually just hooked up a phone.
Yeah.
So really, that like now that technology is so high quality that you could even sell that, like fixing it in post, obviously, but just even just that kind of works.
Yeah. So you see, this is interesting, because you've sort of touched on my second part, because I was thinking on the one hand, it's kind of a blessing, because I don't really have the money to be a Hollywood studio, but I can still make something, and I can make something of fairly decent quality, and I can put it on my computer, and there's enough software out there that I can even add some special effects and do some interesting things. And you see some videos on YouTube that have been made, and you're like, wow, these are really good. Like, okay, then are they a movie at the cinema? No, they're not going to be, but well done you. That was tremendous.
Yeah.
The problem comes then that maybe this accessibility to technology and what we can do with it in the hands of someone who does have that huge budget and backing at times can be to the detriment of film. So you've mentioned about the interview that James did, that I heard that interview as well, where they've taken the technology, done something quite interesting with it. And I haven't seen the movie, but it sounds like it's to the benefit of the film. But I feel like there's this trend as well in films at times to just be like, well, we can fix that in post, we can fix that in post, we can fix that in post. And it turns out they can't. They get there, now everybody's gone home, there's no way to reshoot the scene. And it's like, oh, we can't fix this in post.
Yeah.
So do you feel that technology is kind of hindering film in any way?
I don't think so, but I think it's a learning process. And as a kid, I was a weird kid in that I watched hours upon hours, like literally hundreds of hours of bonus features to films that I liked.
Oh, wow. Okay.
as like a 6-year-old, whatever. And one of them that I used to watch is I grew up on the prequels for Star Wars. And so George actually did a really good job of just having a behind the scenes camera rolling at all times. And instead of cutting it together to make it kind of, this documentary experience kind of thing, it kind of is, but like that most films now do, where it's really, short and it's more stylized. It's literally just like 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes of just footage of, the actual process. But I say that because in the prequels, George relied way too heavily on CGI because
Really?
CGI became like, a new thing. And you kind of see that that progression over the 3 films of him just kind of going more and more into that, especially in 2. But
it's the pair. The pair is really the tipping point on that.
But I think it's kind of a learning process because a lot of films in their early 2000s, late 90s were really dipping heavily into CGI. They're like, oh, this is a new thing. And while it was, you had to find the balance. And so I think now films are kind of coming to their own of, oh, we need to have a balance of practical and CGI if we need CGI at all, And so I think really any new technology is just kind of a learning process that filmmakers kind of have to fail at and kind of figure out. And there's still the films that come out today that didn't really learn the lesson. But, it's as with anything, I think it's a learning process. But ultimately, I think it's to the betterment, because without it, we wouldn't have things like the MCU and stuff. So I think, it's for the betterment of film.
Yeah, I think so. It's always interesting, isn't it, when they're kind of backed into a corner almost, because like they don't have the technology, they can't just fix it. That's when sometimes some of the most, like when you hear the behind the scenes and you realize how they shot a scene or what they did, and you're like, wow, that's just such a simple like thing you've done there. So maybe, I don't know, we just put this on front of the camera, or we turn the camera around, or we made the actor stand on his head or whatever, and it's like, okay, that's like a really good idea, well done.
Yeah, that worked out better.
Yeah, but I think sometimes when you go back and you watch some of like these like older movies, much older movies, and you're like, how did they do that? How did they do that when...
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose a lot of the actors just died. That's got to be what happened. But
I think a general rule for a film is just some of the best stuff comes out of adversity. And I think like one good... there's many examples that I could give, but one example is in Jaws. Spielberg wanted to have this big animatronic shark that was going to be like revealed like almost like the second time you see it, but that kept breaking in the water, and because of that they had to improvise, and in the end ended up making the film way more terrifying because all you see is this fin, and specifically like in the first attack there's the barrels that it's dragging around, and the mystery of that ended up making it more scary than if they had the shark, fully revealed. So I think a lot of, really like things that like really good films that people see now, a lot of, the best stuff comes out of them being hindered and having to improvise.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it is interesting to see how things develop and what people are able to do because they have to, isn't it? I watched a film the other day in preparation for another podcast that I'm going to be on. But, I watched the Adventures of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn. That was like
my dad bought that for me when I was a kid. I own that. That film's like amazing.
1938 that came out. And
yeah,
I'm watching it and I'm like,
Technicolor films.
I was like, man, like it's really good for the year. Like you're seeing the things they're doing and you're thinking, when someone's flying up on a rope over a wall, they're really flying on a rope over a wall. There's there's no green screen there just going, we'll just pretend, or like just dropping out of trees and stuff. And I was thinking, and I suppose, I imagine like 10 years ago, you'd probably watch it and go like, oh, I've seen people drop out of a tree much better than that. But I feel like we've now passed beyond that, where we're like, oh, they would have just CG'd that. That wouldn't have even been a tree. That would have been just a... So it's kind of interesting to see the progression and then almost the regression of these things, where they're like... Because it's what's happening now with the whole kind of practical effects thing. Like, they're really... as you said, there was a period when it was like, hey, we're using computers. This is incredible. And now they're like saying, hey, we're not using computers. These, you see a man there, he's really there. That's kind of the way it's,
and I think,
come full circle.
Yeah. And I think it's just, I think it's just them kind of coming back to the roots almost. Like film has always just been, recording something that's happening. And I think they had to, like, filmmakers had to kind of figure out on their own, because you learn by failing. I think they had to learn through failure that CGI is a tool, not the actual device. And I think I think in recent years they've kind of come back around and figured that out more. But I think that's something that they had to they had to find out that it's a tool. It's not the method.
Yeah, they learned the hard way.
Yeah, most filmmakers
they learned with the prequels. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So normally by now I'll flip things around a bit and I will hand off to you and ask if you have to kind of take control of the conversation and to ask me any questions about your topic. So topic this week we're saying is filmmaking. So film and filmmaking, we should say. Any questions you have for me on your topic?
Yeah, well, I'm curious to know what kind of position you think you would fill in if you were making a film.
I'd probably just be the guy who's telling you everything you're doing wrong, but without really being able to offer a better solution. So, but like, that scene doesn't work. Why not? Well, because he shouldn't be standing there. That doesn't make sense. Why is she doing that? Well, how would you fix it? I don't know, but I'm telling you that doesn't work.
You could be like an assistant director.
Yeah. I feel like I fill that role a lot in life. So, no, probably. I'd probably be. It would be something really stupid like continuity or something like that, because I'm quite. I pick up on those things quite quickly. I'm like, hold on a second, guys. Why has he changed his shirt? Like, what? Yeah. We cut away. It was 2 buttons were open. Suddenly they're all closed. What's going on? That's so I reckon I'd probably have some really boring job like that. But it sounds like you say it's boring, but like it's actually pretty important, because anything like that could really, throw an audience off. I guess for another question, do you have any favorite filmmakers working in the business, whether they're directors or writers or anybody behind the scenes that you really, really like and follow? So, I'm not 100% sure if I do. Let's put it that way. Like, it's rare that I'm gonna hear it's rare that it's like going to be, oh, this person's directing a film, or this person's like written something, or this person's starring in something, and I'm going to run to see it. But I suppose I do have a degree of, like, I do know who's doing things, if that makes sense. So I'm not like all in on kind of, oh, I love this director, he's amazing. Probably because nobody's got that 100% record. So there's always somebody who's kind of done one that you're like, oh, I didn't really enjoy that. Or, I mean, well, you know, Star Wars is a good example we mentioned before. You know, George Lucas could do no wrong until he did wrong, and then he could do no right, kind of thing. But like, I mean, we talked a bit about the MCU. So, like, I loved the Captain America movies. Winter Soldier was brilliant. So when I heard that the Russo brothers were doing Infinity War, I was quite positive. Like, oh, I'm glad they're doing it, as opposed to Joss Whedon, who did the other two Avenger movies. I was like, I prefer what they're doing. Like, so I was happy about it. So I kind of know enough about what's going on behind the scenes to understand, oh, this should be good because this person's doing it, and I'm not sure I'm going to like this because... So again, I'm so negative. I'm such a negative person because, like, I don't really like J.J. Abrams very much.
Okay.
For one thing that he constantly does that I strongly disagree with, the whole mystery box thing irritates me no end. And you know, we don't,
like his favorite thing ever.
Yeah, we don't have an hour to continue on this rant that I'm going to go on, but like the whole thing of The Force Awakens and all the who is Rey's father and who's Rey's mother and who's this person and why are they here? And it's like, well, we're leaving these mysteries. You're not. You're just not giving me enough information. That's not a mystery. That's just bad storytelling that you've not revealed enough for me. And doing the comparison of like, well, it was like how Darth Vader was Luke's father. No, because I didn't go out of Star Wars going, I wonder who Luke's father is. That didn't matter. When it was revealed in Empire, oh, wow, hold on a second. That's interesting. But I didn't leave this, you know, you don't leave the film going, I've got all these questions. And he just loves doing that. But they're not interesting questions. They're just, well, we didn't give you enough information to answer a question. That's just lazy. And he does it in so many things. And as you said, it's his favorite thing. And I hate it. I don't know if I liked Last Jedi or not. I'm undecided at this point.
I don't know either.
But I really did like that he just sort of just pushed everything off the table of like, here's all the mystery boxes that I've left. Yeah, I don't want any of those. Just because, but that's much more a personal issue than anything to do with the movie. So I do have viewpoints. They're probably not very good, but yeah, but it's not enough to kind of, let's say if there was a film coming out that I had no interest in and you told me, but it's this director, I still wouldn't see it. I mean, I probably might see it, you know, on TV or on Netflix or something, but I'm not going to make an effort to go and see something because of the director. I need to maybe see a trailer and be like, oh, this looks like an interesting movie. Oh, and it's by this guy? Well, okay, that's like a bonus, but I don't think it's enough to compel me to invest my time, money, or energy just on who's behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I totally agree. But there's like 2 or 3 directors that I'll go based on their merit. But that's because like I've seen most of their films and I love every single one. Yeah,
who give us some names, and you can't leave a mystery box like that.
Denis Villeneuve, who did Arrival and Blade Runner 2049. He's fantastic. Christopher Nolan.
Right. Okay.
I love his stuff.
All of his stuff.
Well, I haven't seen a few. I haven't seen Insomnia, or Memento, I think. But I've seen pretty much everything else.
Okay, but I think they're two that got quite highly praised, if I'm not wrong. So it's not like.
Yeah, I think.
It's not like Memento... there are a couple that he's done that people are a little bit iffy on, but I don't think it was either of those. So
well, I think the main 2 ones that most people are iffy on are Insomnia and Interstellar. I really enjoyed Interstellar, and I haven't seen Insomnia yet, so I can't say. But Memento is like highly praised. I need to get around to seeing that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of films I need to see, but yeah. Other than that,
and we've got a third director that we're waiting to hear.
yeah, I don't. I'm trying to think. I'm not entirely sure. I want to keep an eye out on the guys who did Swiss Army Man, which is one of my favorite films. Daniel, I'm not even going to try to pronounce their last names, but there are two Daniels that work together.
I don't think I've ever even heard of this film. So
no, okay, yeah, it's pretty not. It's not super well known. I guess I'll give a brief overview. It's R-rated, so keep that in mind. But it's essentially the main two actors and characters are Paul Dano and Daniel Radcliffe. And Paul Dano's character is stranded on this island, and he's about to take his life. And he sees this dead body wash up on the beach, and it's Daniel Radcliffe playing a dead body. And it just kind of goes from there. In like, it's really inventive, it's really original, they do a lot of really cool things with the soundtrack and the story and kind of just asking social questions and stuff, and I really enjoy it. But it's
now that you
really
say
weird.
that,
Like,
I definitely feel like I've seen a trailer for that. I
yeah.
feel like
It
I've
was
seen
really,
something because
like,
that's stuck in my mind, but I
yeah.
I don't think I went
Yeah,
any
it's-
further than that.
It's obscure, and but it's really good, and it's by a production company, A24, who've done some really good films. Yeah, so I want to keep an eye out for what those directors do. But that was their first time directing a feature film. So yeah, I don't think I could say any other directors that I like actively go to the cinemas to see their stuff.
Yeah, I suppose again it's changed slightly from back in the day because I guess not that the director has less control than before, but there are so many other elements to think about, particularly with how much the studio's involved or lawyers behind the scenes that are allowing some things and not other things.
There's so many movies by committee now. It's the worst.
Yeah, so I suppose that kind of means that it could be a great director, but he's just found himself in a difficult position, or it could be a bad director who's found himself in an incredibly favorable situation. And I suppose it makes it more difficult to really distinguish who's got merit and who just happens to be in. You know, I can think off the top of my head a few examples in the last couple of years of people that had huge blockbuster success followed by being kicked off a movie. So
yeah, there's definitely some names I keep track of, but I don't actively go because I've had one or two of those failures. So yeah.
Well, it has been very interesting to talk about film and cinema, because I always feel like I'm very bad on this kind of thing. I'm so
no, you were really great.
Yeah, well, I'm just such a kind of like, is it entertaining? Yes, great, we'll watch it then. and some of the films that I watch with, particularly the ones I watch with my wife, and we'll watch it, we'll enjoy it. And I'm not saying it's a masterpiece, but we're like, yeah, we had fun with it. And then I'll listen to a podcast or something, and they will just rip it apart, all the terrible things about this movie, and I'll be like, but it was all right, it killed 2 hours. That's fine. What more do you want from a film?
I think really it's just whatever you enjoy, whatever and really what you're trying to get out of it.
Yeah, I think that's
really
probably very important. Is what do you want from it? And for me, I just want an hour and a half maybe of not having to think about all the other things I've got to do in the week. So anything that kind of distracts me for that long.
And I think that's it's a different way that is is working in the industry or something like that. So
yeah. And anyone who's then going to review it on a podcast.
Definitely
watch it with a much more critical eye than me. So with my wife, we're kind of going through all the episodes of Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman. It was back in the 90s, and just it's interesting to see the way we review a TV show. It's quite different from probably the way professionals do, but we're just sort of like picking out like, can you imagine they were using beepers all the time back then? That's crazy. And why is Superman doing this? That's nonsense. And who made that cardboard cutout of Superman? Like, where did they get the picture from? So it's very it's not the cinematography or the special effects. It's just very weird observations.
I think that's what is interesting about a variety of different reviewers. You kind of have your own flavor.
Yeah. Well, as I was saying, it's been really nice having you on. I know that where you are, it's kind of time to eat. Where I am, it's definitely time to sleep. So thank you very much for making the time and being able to do this despite the long distance your voice had to travel to be with us today.
Thank you for having me on. It was worth traveling my voice.
Excellent. So we've mentioned a bit your podcast. You can get it on YouTube. I will try and include all the links in the descriptions. Do you have like a Twitter and Instagram that you want to plug at all, or is it mainly just the podcast that people can find you on?
It's kind of fledgling right now, so I'll be building things up as I go. You could follow me on Twitter at KitFist3, but I don't really post anything besides trailers, so I'm kind of boring right now. But I'll get some pages up for the podcast up soon and stuff. So things in the works. By the time this comes out, there might be some things. But,
okay. Well, if there's anything new by the time this comes out, it will be in the description. So if you never read the descriptions, please read the description today. That's all I ask of you, dear listener. Obviously, for us here at A Conversation With, you can contact us by email, aconversationwithpod@gmail.com. Twitter and Instagram is ACWpod. We've got the Patreon, that is patreon.com/aconversationwith. And as I mentioned on the last one, we've made a few changes. So the Old New Adventures of Superman has been deleted from that feed. It's all been brought over, so it's all under the ACW pod now. So you'll find everything here. So thank you for listening, and hope that we'll see you again next week. And it just leaves us to say goodbye.
Bye.